Morena koutou katoa. Welcome to another seasonal update here on the little farm. It is June and winter and it's spitting and drizzling outside, so I've had to park up in the shed today. There's like a hay bale behind me, which is pretty farmy, and I've got these little pumpkins here which are pretty cute, so it seems like a good enough setting to do this update. It is the 2nd of June here in New Zealand, and towards the end of May certainly felt winter's arrival. We've had a few frosts, lots of rain, we had some thunder and lightning the other night, and really high winds of late, which have just battered everything. The days are feeling really short now that Matariki and winter solstice are approaching. It now signals one growing season has ended and another is starting, and at the moment it's certainly time for rest. It's really good to follow the seasons and go with what they do. In winter I feel is the time to really slow down, cozy up by the fire, eat all the harvest, put on your layer of winter fat and have some good rest before the next growing season begins. Everything is in the garden that needs to be, and I probably won't start any more seedlings until, July, August, in preparation for planting out later in spring. And I'll start these first seedlings inside or in the greenhouse where it's warm enough for them to germinate. My winter garden is looking a lot more full than this time last year in winter, where I think I just had a few beds as shown in my first video with a few sickly looking brassicas and things. So I'm really stoked with the effort I've put in this year, and it's looking a lot more abundant. I've made a really solid attempt at growing brassicas this year. Man, they've taken a while. Like the first ones I planted were back in February, and only just now in June some are just starting to be ready to harvest. But I'm pleased to see I have some cauliflower and cabbage that are ready to harvest, and hopefully I'll have a few more that I can continue to harvest over the winter and spring. The white butterfly were an issue that I've harped on about, and you can definitely see some of the damage that they've caused to the brassicas that I didn't cover. I definitely removed the nets way too early, and we still had white butterfly, even in May, that was still flying around laying their eggs. I've got a bit of a philosophy, here we go, about working with nature rather than fighting against it. And in the case of the white butterfly, I certainly felt like I was fighting against them. So I'm going to try something different in the next season and uncover all my bird netting, well, in some areas at least, and uncover some of the brassicas and see if just the wild birds will serve as a natural pest control for the brassicas instead. I'll still keep some covered just in case it doesn't work, but I'm going to try that approach, working with nature instead. Otherwise, in the beds, I've got like lots of daikon that I can harvest. There's greens like spinach and silver beet and lettuce. I've got some broad beans I'm trying this year for the first time, and they sound like a really great crop because they provide food over the winter if you can grow them, of course. And even if they don't, produce much food, they're also a nitrogen fixer and are going to be really good for replenishing the beds in which I had heavy feeders in over the summer, like tomatoes. There are other beds that are just going into rest mode over the winter, and I'm letting them go really wild in classic Nick fashion, or just have them covered in a green cover crop. And this means it keeps the soil nice and covered and healthy, and keeps the little microorganisms and bugs all tucked in over the winter. And what I can do come around spring, summer, when I want to plant stuff in it, I can just chop and drop everything. And this leaves the roots to all decompose into the soil, which is a good carbon source and provides little tunnels for the worms to crawl around in. And then the green on top can decompose back into the soil and add a whole lot of nutrients for the summer crops. Over the last month or two, I've been slowly staggering the garlicin, And the earliest I planted in the last video, the first little shoots are just coming up now, so I'm anxiously waiting for the rest of the shoots to pop up. I find it really interesting. I've got chilies that I can harvest in the winter, but I'm certainly not complaining. I might try and overwinter some of the chilies outside and cover them in a frost cloth because they're not going to like the cold weather that's still to come. And then I've got a few more in pots that I'm overwintering in the greenhouse. I've got a few late potatoes that are looking very dead on top from the frost we've had. I planted them in late summer, and I'm hoping that when I dig them up soon, there'll be a few spuds there at least. So I've had some fails too. I've had yams growing, but they haven't really produced. They didn't actually produce that well last year either, although I got a little bucket full of them. I think it might be because I've just been slack with weeding and maybe the weeds have outcompeted them. But I also actually suspect that something like rats might be eating the yams as well. So I might have to set some traps to control them. I've also had another epic fail with carrots. Later in the summer, I tried to work really hard and prep all the beds properly. Add, sand and stuff in there, so it's nice soil for them to grow in. Watered them to keep them moist so they germinated, and they did germinate. The problem is they just haven't taken off and haven't done well. So I've tried weeding, but the weeds have just choked them. So I'd cut the weeds on top and then they'd just grow back, or I'd try and pull them out and then they'd disturb all the roots. So the carrots have just not worked. So I think I can officially just say I suck at growing carrots. Well, just like the garden, it is amazing to see the difference a year can make in the food forest too. Like, looking back at my first video last year compared to now, it's a huge amount of growth has happened. Tree lucerne, I can't recommend it enough. It has just taken off. It's incredible how much it grows in such a short amount of time, and it's a great support species for the other plants. It's also been great to see the natives starting to establish and settle in the food forest as well. And it's been really cool because since autumn, we've seen lots of native birds around, like tui, piwakawaka, korimako, and grey warblers. So it's really cool. It's attracting all that kind of life. The Indian runner ducks, Jenny, Fawn, and Sven, live a mixed life of confinement in the food forest and escaping into the rest of the farm. I actually think they're working for slug control though. So typically in winter, I'd go out like a madman with my torch and my scissors and kill hundreds of slugs in the garden. But when I've been out there of late, there have been only a dozen or so when I've had a look. I mean, we've still got plenty more months yet of slug season, so I'll hold my breath and wait and see, but fingers crossed, it might actually be working. Kia ora, it's me, Future Nick. So I'm just editing the video and talking about how the ducks have been controlling the slugs really well. I was just away for one night in Wellington, and I've come back to Jenny and Sven in the garden, and all these brassicas that were doing so well have been eaten by them. I started these back in early April, and they've just demoed so many. So if you go over here as well, I think this was like really torn off all the leaves here. They've eaten back this one. I've had really good nibble on these ones here. This one's had a really good nibble. Like, look at this. They've just destroyed at least half of the winter brassicas I had in. So what was going to be my best winter garden is now questionable. So all in all, my slug control has caused more damage than slugs would have. Like, it is really gutting. It took a lot of time and patience, and it's now way too late to really get anything else started. Now it's June, so there probably won't be much to harvest over that spring period now. The only thing I can think is that so it's partially netted, my foolish error. I mean, if they'd done this on I was home, I would have checked on them and seen them before they caused too much damage, but of course they went the one night I was away. So what I think they've done is they've got through this deer netting on the neighbour's side. So they've had to go through the neighbour's paddock, past all the alpacas, around here and back through. So it wasn't easy for them to get in, but they still managed it. I mean, you can just take no chances, I guess, and not trust ducks. Anyway, back to the video. The chooks are currently freeloading. They won't produce any eggs likely until spring, though we might use one of them for meat around the winter solstice. We don't often kill a chook for meat, but we do have the odd one each year. The Wiltshire sheep are doing what sheep do, eating grass and sleeping. I prided myself on none getting fly blown, but we did have one due to, I think, the warm, wet autumn that did get fly strike. So luckily I caught it really quickly. I saw it sort of twitching and nibbling near its rear. So I immediately brought it in, and sure enough, it was fly blown. So I had to, shave it back and remove all the maggots and treat it and whatever. And unfortunately, I think that weakened it, because then I think it got a case of worms quite badly as well. So brought it in, gave it a drench, and we'll give it another second drench again soon. And I think it is starting to pick up again now. I was using apple cider vinegar to sort of avoid using drench too much in the sheep, but I think just in some instances you need to use drench to get rid of the worms. I mean, look, I use modern medicine, so the sheep can use modern medicine. So I set a goal for myself last year to document a full year of the seasons here on the farm, and now come full circle back to June. And it's been really helpful to look back on all the learnings and progress that was made over the year. I found it so invaluable to watch other gardeners and homesteaders and farmers who've shared their experiences online, and it's taught me so much about growing kai for myself and my family. So I hope you all have an enjoyable winter solstice and matariki. If you made it this far, thanks for watching. Ka kite anō.